This next video will give you a brief introduction to a technique called partner-assisted scanning. Partner-assisted scanning is a communication technique wherein a communication partner presents options that are listed on a communication board and responds to both a yes and no responses from the user. This technique can be useful if direct selection is not an option based on the user's motor abilities, so long as a reliable yes and no response can be established. Before you begin, it is essential to establish both the yes and no response, which should be both reliable and under the user's control. So some examples could include eyebrow raises, a thumbs up for yes, a thumbs down for no, or any head movement so long as it is consistent. So next, we'll see an example of Emily and Abby establishing the yes and no responses.
Okay, Abby, we're going to work on saying yes and no. Can you try a head nod for yes? Great, we'll use a head nod for yes, and can you try a head shake for no? Wonderful, we'll use a head shake for no.
Once you've established the yes and no responses, it may be helpful to orient the user to the main page.
Today we're going to use pictures to help you talk with me. This one is for feelings, for what hurts, for what you want, for who you want to talk to, for any questions you have, or for something else.
In order for the user to make a selection, they must first establish which row the item is in. To do so, the communication partner should point to a row and ask, "Is it in this row?" Be sure to pause so that the user can decide and coordinate a response, and if they respond no, continue down the rows until they respond with a yes, at which point you can move on to selecting the item. In order for the user to select an item, the communication partner should point to and verbalize each option. Again, be sure to pause to allow time for the user to make a selection, and continue until you've identified which item they want to talk about.
If you want to talk about something in this row, tell me yes. Okay, so something in this row. Is it feelings? No. Is it what hurts? No. Is it what you want? Yes. Okay.
When moving to a new communication board, be sure to give the user enough time to orient themselves to their new options.
So you can take a minute to check out your options.
Now, you can use the same steps as before to identify the row and item that the user wants to talk about, and once they've made a decision, be sure to respond accordingly.
Is it in this row? I see you telling me no. Is it in this row? Yes. Okay. Is it read? Is it toys? Is it watch TV? All right, awesome.
Some strategies for successful partner-assisted scanning are to really be clear about what the yes and no responses are, to keep the options, whether they be in the rows or the items, in the same order every time you go through them, and to allow enough time for the user to make a decision. So variables that may affect decision time could include the type of response as well as the type of setting, so always be sure to stay flexible. And lastly, it may help to verbally identify the selection and then also to disregard any unintentional movement and really focus on the message.